All right, I think we're going live. Welcome, everybody, on this Tuesday evening, August 29th, and it is now 9:39 p.m. Central Time in Minnesota, where I am. Hope y'all had a great day. I did. I hung some onions. I harvested about probably 30 or 40 pounds of onions the other day. A lot. And I learned how to hang them, so I've been hanging onions and I'm just getting stuff done around here, kind of because we're wrapping up summer, headed into fall, and so I've just been kind of busy around my house, mostly in my yard. So that to me is a great day. Me and the dogs went into town, and they went crazy over another dog. It was kind of funny because I go to the dollar store in town. Not a real dollar store, but it's like a Dollar General or something. Anyway, they got dog snacks there that I get, dog treats, and it's kind of funny living in a small town. It's so different than living in a city. Like I saw these couple come in with this big giant white dog, and they just walked right in the store. Not a service dog, just their dog. And you see like motorcycles and ATVs and snowmobiles pulling up to the gas pumps. It's like there's not a lot of laws here. I like that. I like it. I hope I never have to move back to the city. I love it up here. Anyway, nothing like a small town. Actually, I live in a town of 300 people in a township, but the closest town from here is 1,200 people, and that's a little over 7 miles away. So I love living in a small town. Um, Actually, next month I'm looking forward to going to the apple orchard. There's an apple orchard just a couple miles up the road. Haven't been there yet because they're only open in September and October, and for some reason I always get busy around that time. I don't have time to go on because they're only open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So anyway, I'm gonna catch them this year. I'm gonna hit that apple orchard and fun stuff like that. So anyway, I hope y'all had a good day. As you can see by the title, it says two versions of the Manna from Heaven story. Yes, there's two different versions of that. One, of course, is in Exodus, and the other one's in Numbers. I think Numbers 11. Is it? Which is it? I think it is. Numbers 11. So yeah, there's two different versions. It's not even one blended story. It's two completely different stories in two different books. And anyway, it's like the second person that wrote it has no idea that the first one's already been written. But anyway, so we're going to go over that tonight, the differences in the two stories. We're going to show you the two sources that the two versions come from, and the book of Numbers that comes from the E source, the Elohim source, which came first before the second version, which is the priestly source. And that one is in Exodus. Even though chronologically the book of Exodus comes before the book of Numbers, the story in the book of Numbers came first because it's the Elohim source, but it probably came a couple hundred years before the story that came along in Exodus because that's the priestly source, and they didn't even come around until a couple hundred years later. Um, so yeah, because the books are not in chronological order, obviously. I don't think any of them are in the whole Bible. Front to back, none of them are. Although, let me think. You know what? The only thing that is maybe in chronological order would be parts of Genesis. And I mean, parts. And then were written first, but so was Job. The book of Job was written at the same parts as some of Exodus, probably earlier from Mesopotamia. And also, what's the other one? Job and Jonah. Those are stories probably from Mesopotamia, the old country. And those were long before any of them, actually. So, anyway, so we're going to go over the two versions of manna, the manna from dropping from God from heaven. And it'll be interesting because I'm going to show you a couple other things too that that stem from this story. Something Jesus said comes from this manna story, and maybe some people don't know, so it might be a fun fact. Okay, so let's head over, shall we? Let's see. Now I got my I'm gonna try to do this with my cat here. I know you can't even see him; he's so dark. But that's my cat right in front of me here. So I'm gonna try to push him a little bit forward so we can see this. Yeah, he's black and the desk is black, so or mahogany or whatever. All right. So we're gonna go over to. We're gonna start, of course, going to the doublets. The list of doublets. I might have to move my cat because this is not gonna work. Yeah, you, the cat, you gotta move here. Let me get Bosker's out of the way. His name is Bosco. Oops. I forgot the camera's on. Shine it at the wall. Sorry about that. I forgot it was on. Let me get my cat out here. Here, you gotta go. Mister, you gotta leave. Come on, Bosco. Get up. Yep, buddy, you gotta go. Okay? Yep, gotta go. Gotta go. Gotta go. He'll probably jump back up. But it's not gonna work with him sitting here because I gotta get up close to this thing here. So you guys can see, because I can barely see. There we go. Move it a little closer. All right, so here we are in the Bible Brisket. There you go, Bible Brisket site. And this is where you're going to find a list of the doublets. There's 31 on this list here. That's probably the whole list. I don't know if there's more than 31, but there's 31 on this list. I've seen lists with smaller amounts. So this is probably the most extensive list I've seen, but I like this site because it will tell you the sources. So the four sources are the Yahweh source, J, E, Elohim, D, Deuteronomy, P, Priestly. Now, the Yahweh and the Elohim came about 200 years at least before the Priestly and the Deuteronomy source. So if you see the four of them and you just know that the Yahweh and Elohim source are the ones that were there. What was it? 700 BC? I can't remember. Actually, I could look it up real quick. Real easy. So just type in doublets timeline. I think I might have this on my bookmark, but I got so many bookmarks, I think it's faster for me to do this. They're showing that funny jacket. Oh, speaking of funny jackets, we just talked about Joseph and his amazing long-sleeved jacket last night, or his coat. I was listening to somebody today, a Bible scholar, and her name is Jennifer Bird, which she has story time like twice a week. Anyway, she's going over the Old Testament stuff right now. Anyway, let me pull this up. She was talking about that jacket, that coat, Joseph's amazing dream coat is his amazing coat. And actually, we're going to go over that sometime because it's funny. You know what that is? It's actually, and I can, kind of take a minute to go through all the Bible verses that line up with it, but it is actually a princess dress. That's what he was wearing, a princess dress. I know it's hard to believe, but I can prove it. Hey, Grace, how you doing tonight? Welcome. I sent you a text about some lady I talked to today. She had drunk the Kool-Aid big time. Thinks Trump has been in power the whole time. The Clintons have been executed. Biden has been executed. It's a guy, a clone, I guess. I'm like, oh, wow. So what do you think is going to happen on the next election? Yeah. I said, what do you think? Stop it! Wrecking my couch. Hey! Oh, I'm going to throw something at him. Hey! Stop it! Oh, my God. All right. Sorry about that. Sucker's wrecking my couch. Oh, did you? Yeah, I haven't been on my phone. On a second, I gotta jack this thing up with the book. Yeah. And she listens to Julie Green and Kent Christmas. You're probably I've been getting ready for this for about an hour. Because I had to pull up a lot of stuff. We're gonna go over some cool stuff here that it's gonna be interesting. Yeah, it took me a long time to get all this ready, so about an hour. So yeah, I haven't been on my phone. Oops, come on. Yeah, she listens to Julie Green and Kent Christmas, who have both falsely predicted Prince Charles would never be in power, and that didn't happen. And anyway, the only reason I know is because of Drew Bloom has been exposing him or whatever. These false prophets on YouTube that they got like hundreds of thousands of people listening to them, and this lady is all in. Anyway. She is drinking so much Kool-Aid, I really couldn't get through to her. So anyway, I just kind of went over it. Yeah, she said Clintons have been executed, which is kind of funny. Trump has gotten all the pedophiles on an island somewhere. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it's called Epstein Island. Anyway, I didn't say anything because she's just too far gone. People, they love their Kool-Aid, boy. So here's the sources that I was just talking about. So tonight we're gonna see two versions of the Manna from Heaven story, which to me had a red flag the first time I heard it, because I'll tell you why in a minute. And they love their false spot. Oh my goodness, if I would have said anything bad about Julie Green or Kent Christmas, it probably wouldn't have gone over too well. No. And she said her husband doesn't believe a thing. I'm like, good for him. To myself, I'm saying, oh, good for him. My husband doesn't believe anything. I'm trying to convince him, like, yeah, good luck. So far, your husband's still of sound mind then. Anyway. Yeah. Have you heard of her? Oh, you should watch her. She's so filled with God. I don't know who those people. The only reason I know is because Drew Bloom exposed them so many times. I don't even watch him. You know what I think about him. Not only that, but Drew Bloom said some bad stuff about me on his live stream. He said I'm can't remember what he called me because I don't believe that Paul was I've got problems with Paul, and so he made a big deal. I told everybody. And you know what was really sad about that? Out of all the channels, I'm the only one that I know of that prayed for his family Remember, he was asking everybody for prayers because it was COVID, and the daughter was supposed to get married, and they might not get married because of COVID. And he asked for prayers. Nobody prayed that I know of. I mean, no, I can't even say that. Of course, probably people prayed, but not even liking him. I didn't even like him, but I still asked everybody to pray for him and his family that the wedding goes through despite this COVID stuff. And I didn't even like him, and I still prayed for him because he really they had this wedding plan anyway. And then he comes out like a couple weeks later and just trashes me. I'm like, dang, all right. Because I had a problem with Paul. And there is a problem. There's lots of problems with Paul. Anyway, glunk, 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 more Kool-Aid. All right. So tonight we're going to look at the two manna stories. One's in Exodus, one's in Numbers. So as you can see here, the one in Exodus is going to be from the priestly source. This blue one right here, right? So the one in Exodus, although Exodus comes before Numbers, obviously, but this one was in Exodus, but written after the one in Numbers. So the one in Numbers is from, the one in Numbers was written in the Elohim source. So as you can see, what was that, 8 to 900 BC. And then the story that comes along in Exodus 16 is written by the priestly source, and that's at least 200 years later. So we're going to go over the, I guess we'll go over the first one in, the first story we'll go over the priestly, we're going to go over the one in Numbers. Let's go over the first one that was written, the one in Numbers. This is Numbers 11, chapter 4 through 34 is Elohim source. And then we'll go over the priestly source, which is Exodus 16, 2, 3. So anyway, Exodus 16, we'll just put it that way. So Exodus 16, priestly source. Numbers is Elohim source, and that's Numbers 11. Well, last time I checked, Drew Bloom still had a normal sized head. His skull did not shrink down and come out of his mouth, predicted by the great YouTube prophet Revelation Margaret. No, it did not. He saw that on a Skittles commercial anyway. I think it was Skittles or something. There was a commercial years ago, like a decade ago, when I used to watch TV still. That was a long time ago. But there was I think it was Skittles or something. But anyway, somebody put something in their mouth. I think it was Skittles, and their head shrunk, and it came out, their mouth was laughing, it came out their mouth or something like that. He saw that on a Skittles commercial. Anyway. All right. So, yeah. So first we will go over the first one written, we're going to go over in Numbers 11. So let's go over it. Oh, actually, I'll show you real quick the starts, because we didn't even finish this part. I had to get my cat out of the way. Got detoured. All right. So, Elohim source. Yahweh source. Okay, here. So the E and the P. So here, these have been labeled here. Where is it? Manna from heaven. Where is that? Here it is. Number 21. Manna and quail in the wilderness. So as you can see, the first source is the priestly source. I mean, the one in Exodus is a priestly source, Exodus 16. Then there's a second story. It was actually written first, the Elohim source, in Numbers 11. Oops. All right, so there's two stories here. They're not matching. It appears that the Numbers one was written first by Elohim source, and then Exodus 16 was written by a priestly source who didn't seem to know anything about this story. So this person, or this source, the priestly source, wrote their second and didn't seem to have read this source, the Elohim source. So we'll look into that. So let's go over. We're going to go to the first one that was written was in Numbers. Numbers, and then we're going to go over the differences. You'll probably see the difference, but we're going to go over them. Back this up a little bit. You can see it. All right. All right, so this story is the people complain. It goes from, well, here to about 34, about verse 34. So let's go over this story. And anyway, then we'll go over the second version of the story, and then we're going to go over the differences between the two. And there's a lot of serious questions here, because one of them really doesn't make any sense. All right. All right, so the people complain. We all know this story, right? But we're going to start here and read the whole thing. Numbers 11. By the way, this is a Blue Letter Bible, which I like this site, and it is English Standard Version because I speak English. All right, there you go. Numbers 11. And this is 1 through 34, I think. And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them. Hold on a second. And his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. It's kind of funny that God got so mad because they were complaining. But anyway, then the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So God was mad. Oops. Well, first the people complained. All right, they complained about their misfortunes because they're out in the desert and all these problems. When the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed outlying parts of camp. So imagine they're in this camp, and all around the camp is burning. All right, so he sets this fire. God sets a fire all around the camp and scares the crap out of them, I'm sure. Then the people cried out to Moses, Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. He's like, all right, I'll tone it down a little bit. So he lowered the fire. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. And there's a footnote here that says Terah means burning. So I suppose in Hebrew it means burning. So that's what it was called. The place there, they complained and God burned around them, was called Taberah because it means burning. Now, I don't know what it's called today. Anyway, you can probably find that out pretty easy. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. What the heck is a rabble? Curious, can you look up, see what a rabble is? R-A-B-B. Another rabble that was among them had a strong craving. The heck is a rabble? And the people of Israel also wept again and said, oh, that we have no meat to eat. Okay. Like I said, there's kind of a lot of problems with this story, but we'll keep going. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. Okay, so they already have manna. All right. So somehow they're already getting manna. All right. And they're tired of it. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like that of down. And you can Google this. Look, you can Google the Numbers manna, and they'll show you a picture of it. It's like little white balls. It looks like kicked cereal. Anyway, there's pictures of it online. The people went about and gathered it and ground it in hand mills or beat it in mortars and boiled it in pots and made cakes of it. The taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell upon the camp at night, the manna fell with it. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? That you should say to me, carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing child, to the land that you swore to give to their fathers? A lawless person? Oh, okay. It's a bunch of lawless people. They're tired of not having meat and all them other good stuff. Thank you, Grace. I appreciate that. That's what a ramble is. That's why they call it a ramble rouser. Yeah. All right. Rabble rouser. Whatever. Did I conceive these people? So he's saying these aren't my kids. Why am I taking care of them? Where am I to get meat to give all this people? Give to all these people. For they weep before me and say, give us meat that we may eat. Am I not able to carry all this alone? Or no, he said, I am not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you'll treat me like this, kill me at once. If I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. Now, elders appointed to aid Moses. And I think this is the end of. Oh no, we're going to keep going to 34. Okay. I said it's not the end of the chapter; it's just another section. Elders appointed to aid Moses. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Gather me 70 men." All right, now we're going to skip down to. Let me go make sure there's no more before 34. All right, here. So here. All right. So now we're back to the quail. Now this is 11:31. Quail and a plague. Then a wind from the Lord sprang up, and it brought quail from the sea. Now remember that. Quail from the sea. And let them fall beside the camp, about a day's journey on this side, and a day's journey on the other side. So you could walk all day in any direction, and there's still quail dead on the ground. And about 2 cubits above the ground. So that is what, 4 feet or 2 feet? No, 18 inches, a foot and a half. So a foot and a half high for, you can walk for a day. And that, so there's just so many dead. And the people rose all that day and all night and all the next day and gathered the quail. Those who gathered least gathered 10 homers, which is 6 bushels. That's a minimum they gathered was six bushels and up. And they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. Dead pigeons or quails or whatever. While the meat was yet between their teeth, before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people. And the Lord struck down the people with a very great plague. Therefore, the name of that place was called Kilbroth Hatava, which means graves of craving, because they craved and they ate and then they're dead. Because there they buried the people who had the craving. So anybody who craved meat was eating it. So they were still chewing on it when they were struck dead. From Kilbroth Hatava, the people journeyed to Hezroth, and they remained at Hezroth. So that's the first story, okay? Now, we're going to go over the differences in these two stories. We're going to go to the second version of the story, and that is in Exodus. where you would think they would put this story, right? Because they're coming out of Egypt. Now, my question was always in my head is, okay, wait a minute. So they left Egypt. And actually, there is a discrepancy on that too. There is a discrepancy on how long after they left Egypt, but still, okay, it really, because the two stories are totally different. One they got the manna on at one point, and the other time they got it way later. But either way, it doesn't, even if there's even, forget that. Why are they craving meat? Remember when, and I'm going to show you when they came out of Egypt. Remember God said that all the Egyptians' cattle are going to die, but not one of the Israelites' cattle is going to die. And that happened. And then when they came out, according to the story, they came out with all their cattle, and it was like, I don't know, 500,000 guys and all their. So there's like 1 million to 2 million people plus all their cattle. Okay, my question is, what happened to all these cattle? If they've only been out there for a short while, what happened to all these cattle that, remember, they were guaranteed not to die? Okay, so now they're craving meat. Where did all these cattle go? They should have more cattle. If you had herds and herds and herds of cattle and lambs and sheep and goats and all these other things, where are they? They should be multiplying. You should actually have more by this point. Anyway, what happened to all those? Remember, God guaranteed they wouldn't die. Anyway, we're going to go over that too. I'll show you that when we get done here, right? We're going to do this one, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. And then a kind of a fun fact. I'll show you that too. So this now this is actually the second version of the Manna story, and it's like these people didn't even hear the first version. This is the northern, is it northern or southern tribes? I can't remember. And then the priestly source. So it's the Elohim source, but this here is the priestly source. Now their version came. This version came like 200 years after the one we just read. The one we just read came first. This version here came about a couple hundred years later, and this is by the priestly source. And we're going to read this. So this is Exodus 16. It really doesn't last too long. So anyway, 16:1, bread from heaven. They set out from Elam. And by the way, also the names and the places don't match either. Well, actually, not the places don't match in this story, but now that I think of it, because remember Moses' father-in-law, his name was Jethro, but then all of a sudden it's Raul. So is it Raul? Is it Jethro? I got a wild cat coming up looking for food. They didn't put their food out yet, so he's coming up to my house. I see two eyeballs. Oh, I was going to show you. Two eyeballs looking at the camera blinking at me. I have to feed him when I get off of here. All right. A lawless person? Okay, yeah, these were all lawless, they said. All of them that wanted meat were lawless. They were rabbles or whatever. All right. Bread from heaven. Now this is the priestly version. The second version, it was, like I said, this is written second. So 16:1. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed the land of Egypt. Okay, so just think about this. Yeah, he's going to pound on my door. He is. Think about this. So they've only been gone for 2 weeks. Where did all the cattle go? Where did all the lambs and the sheep and the goats, and where did all these animals go? Remember? I'll show you. I'll remind you with the version, with the scriptures. Okay, they're out 2 weeks, and they're out of, where did all these animals go? Anyway. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Remember, the first time they said just Moses, but whatever. Now it's him and his brother. And the people of Israel said to them, would that we had died. And the people said, so it would be better if we had died in the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out in this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. They would have rather died full, been killed with full bellies, than be out here hungry, alive. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. Remember, if you got more than one, worms would be in it. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So they're accounting for the Sabbath, because you can't go out and gather on the Sabbath. So your whatever you get on Friday, God doubles it. So and it won't rot the next day like it usually does. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. At midnight, at evening. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, When the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him. What are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. Now notice, I'm going to keep going and I will go back. Then Moses said to Aaron, Say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, Come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. And in the evening quail came up and covered the camp, and in the morning dew laid around the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, What is this? Or it is manna. For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, each of you, as much as you can eat. You shall take a homer. You shall each take a homer, about 2 quarts or 2 liters, according to the number of persons in each of you in your tent. So, a 2 liter for each person. And when the people of Israel did so, and they gathered some more, some less. But when they measured it with a homer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. And Moses said to them, No one leave any of it over till the morning. But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms, and it stank. And Moses was angry with them. Now you notice nobody died when the quail was in their teeth when they're chewing on it. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat, but when the sun grew hot, it melted. It was like frost, they said. And the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 homers each, or omers. And when the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is the day of solemn rest, holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you'll bake, boil what you'll boil, and all that is left over lay aside to keep to the morning. So they laid it aside to the morning. Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there was not worms in it. Moses said, Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, there will be none. On the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord's given you the Sabbath. Therefore, in the 6 days, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in its place. Get down. Oh, come on. Can't try to jump up here. See, so the Lord rested on the seventh day. Now that's the end of that story. There is, anyway, so it did say, well, not really the end of it, but it's the end of the, but I do want to point out one thing on here. I'm going to keep going. 6 days. Okay. So, double it up on Friday. So you don't have to eat, but I want to show you something. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and laws? See, the Lord's given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6 days, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rest on the seventh day. Oops. Now the house of Israel called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Almost the same as the other story, but not quite. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. Anyway, I'm just going to show you. Take a jar, and it says, the people of Israel ate the manna for 40 years. You see that? So they ate manna for 40 years in this version, till they came to a habitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan. All right, so those are two versions I'm going to show you. But first, before I even show you that, I'm going to show you something else. Do you know that there is actually a Deuteronomy law because of these? I'm not sure which one the law is based on, if it's the Exodus or the Numbers. Now, if you remember in the book of Numbers, as soon as they bit down on that quail and they had the meat in their teeth, God struck them dead. In the next version, it was different. In fact, I'll show you a picture if I can find one. Let me find it. Here it is. So as you can see in the second version, the story changed. Now, the first version, this is what they ate, just the manna. They got it every morning. And then when the sun got too hot, it melted and it was done for the day. So you had to get out there and get it, gather it. And then this is what they ate. But in the book of Numbers, they were eating manna. They wanted quail. God dropped down quail, and they when it was in their teeth, God killed them. But in the second story in Exodus, it's different. God gladly gives the man in the morning and quail in the evening with no problem. You see that? So the first story that came out in Numbers, that was the original story, they lived on manna. And when they asked for quail, God just dumped a boatload on them, too many, and then as they're chewing it, God struck them dead. And that was back to the manna again. But in the second version, in the priestly source in Exodus, God gladly gives them quail every night. Man in the morning, quail that night. So it's much different. That's a much different version than having one bite of it and getting struck dead because of it. But I'm going to show you a Bible verse that comes from this story. And it is in Deuteronomy. Well, actually, first we'll show you this version right here in Matthew 4:4. Remember when Jesus said, but he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. This comes from this story about the manna and the quail. But when Jesus said, it is written, that means that he's referring to an Old Testament, something from the law, Moses' law. And so what he's referring to, what Jesus is referring to, is this, Deuteronomy. This is referring to the quail and manna story. So in Deuteronomy 8:3, it says, he humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which you neither or your ancestors had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. So Jesus said this, but he got it from Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy got it from this Exodus / Numbers story. So that's what that is. So if you ever wonder why Jesus said that, well, he's referring to this. And why are they saying this? Because of this story about the manna story. So let's go over the differences in the, let me find, all right, there's a contradiction between Exodus 9, oh no, no, that's not the one I want. Let me pull it. There we go. All right. All right. So here's one of them that I'm going to read. And then there's a second one somewhere. Here. Now here's another one. I'm going to hit this one first. He's going to pound and, oh, I thought you just read that. Yeah, you're talking about the cat. Yeah, I went to go get his thug friends. Did God provide quail before or after Sinai? And this is another thing, you guys. Was it before Mount Sinai or after Mount Sinai? Hold on 1 second. All right. Problems with the narrative in Numbers 11. I was just looking at that picture. Looks like that scene out of The Birds, Alfred Hitchcock, when the bats or those birds were attacking everybody. Tippy Hedren ran into the phone booth. Anyway, all right. Problems with the narrative in Numbers chapter 11. And remember, Numbers chapter 11 is actually the original written by this Elohim source. Many of the murmuring stories in Exodus narrative were told in more than one textual tradition. In the present case, the story about the people's desire for meat in the wilderness and Jehovah's reluctant response. See, Jehovah, reluctant response to send quail is recorded in both the Elohist, with what we just read, and the priestly versions of these events. And those are two we just read, many of which contradict each other in various ways. When the textual traditions were later edited together, both versions of the story were preserved by the redactor of the Pentateuch. In the composite text, we call it the Bible, in quotations. The priestly version of the quail story is found in Exodus 16, before the Sinai revelation, okay? This is before Mount Sinai. While the Elohim, the Elohist version is preserved in Numbers 11 after the Sinai event. And you have to ask yourself, if they just came out of Egypt, where'd all these cattle go? The story of the quail in Numbers 11, where the people demand meat to eat, proceeds as if the earlier quail episode in Exodus 16 never occurred. Not only is there no recognition of this earlier miracle, but the author in Numbers 11 tells the reader that the people had not eaten any meat since they left Egypt. How can that be? Another problem with the Elohist narrative of Numbers 11 is that the Israelites sacrificed and presumably to eat. Number two, many animals. Just a few chapters, there were many animals a few chapters prior in chapter 11. So in Exodus 16, when they're saying they have no meat, they haven't had any meat since they left Egypt, how can that be? Not only did they take all them cattle and animals and all the millions of animals with them, or 100,000 animals or whatever it was, they've only been out 2 weeks and they're out of meat. And one said we haven't left, but it was after the Mount Sinai. and one was before. But either way, how can they not have meat since they left Egypt? And okay, so it tells you just a few. So in just a couple chapters earlier, they just mentioned how they had many animals. Many animals. Just a couple chapters before Numbers 11. What was it? I don't know. A couple right before Numbers 11. They just got done saying how many they had many animals. Just a few chapters prior to chapter 11 of Numbers. So. Yeah, where do all these animals go? And what are they sacrificing if they have no animals? Anyway, in the priestly author's account in Numbers 7, we read that the Israelites sacrificed many animals to Jehovah, right? Okay, so in Numbers chapter 7, remember they left with all of those animals out of Egypt. And as a matter of fact, I'll show you that where it says God promised they wouldn't die. Here's Numbers 7. They got tons and tons of animals. In fact, they're sacrificing animals. And then 5 chapters later, they're saying in 16, they say, we haven't had any meat since we left Egypt. Well, what are you talking about? They said you had many animals, just a few. In Numbers 7, we read that the Israelites sacrificed many animals to Jehovah. So we have a glaring contradiction here in the telling of these events from these two scribal traditions. One in which no meat is available until the quail incident, and the other where Israel faithfully sacrificed and eats a multitude of animals. In other words, according to the Elohist account of these events, the Israelites only eat quail here, and only after they left Sinai. I think that was interesting. Those are some good points. Now, a couple more here. Actually, I do have. Let me see. Let me shut some of these because I'm going to find that tab. No. Yeah, so remember, one story, God gives them quail every evening. And the other story, the first time they bite into it, they all die. Anybody who had a mouthful of meat died. All right, must be this one. All right, this is the last one we got here. Okay. Contradictions in, so was there only manna to eat or not? All right, number 227, manna eat or not? Numbers 11 versus Exodus 12, Leviticus 127, and Numbers 7. We went over Numbers 7, Numbers chapter 7, and we also went over, we went over Numbers 11 and Exodus 16. So let's read this article and then we'll be done here. Let me see. I'm not going to read it all, but I want to see the part that I wanted. All right. Numbers 11, a story about people's complaining to Moses that they have no meat to eat, only manna, is part of the murmuring traditions, some of which they looked at in this article, and even seen use contradictory by other biblical scribes. A large extent of the quail story of Numbers 11, where Yahweh responds to Israelites complaining that they have no meat to eat, only manna, by sending them quails just before he strikes them down anyway. It has already been dealt with in the contradiction in this other article, where I've worked the contradiction differently in order to expand. There's kind of referring to other articles, but now the tradition now preserved in Exodus 16 from the priestly source claims that the people have not eaten meat since their departure from Egypt, which is impossible. However, there is a story presently sits in the wilderness narrative is already problematic, since according to the later priestly redactor, the event recorded in Exodus 16 occurs exactly only 1 month from Exodus 16. We are to remember that on the eve of or morning after the Exodus, the Israelites enjoyed their first Passover meal, a roasted lamb per household. Remember that? Now, this is just 4 chapters before they said they haven't had any meat since they left Egypt. But wait a minute. Just a week before, you just had Passover meal where every single household got a roasted lamb. So the complaint of not having meat to eat for only 1 month after having eaten a nice lamb dinner is ill-conceived in the narrative as it has been redacted. Although Exodus 16:13 is a one-verse priestly version of the quail story, the real focus of Exodus 16 is the manna tradition. Here we learn that the children of Israel ate the manna for 40 years till they came to the settled land. They ate the manna until they came to the edge of the land of Canaan, which we just read. The tradition implies that they all eat during the duration, that all that they ate during the duration of the 40-year wilderness period is manna. According to Numbers 11:16, there isn't anything to eat except the manna before our eyes. When they just had a Passover lamb a week before, all of them, everybody had one in their house. This is not the fact in case. As I've mentioned in other entries, the present wilderness narrative is rather a collection of once separated traditions, random legislation, and stories. The biblical texts themselves bear this out, for we are informed that many instances the Israelites eat meat. That is where they eat more than just manna. In fact, manna is curiously absent from these various traditions. First, contrary to this manna quail tradition, or story of Exodus tradition itself, claims that the Israelites left with a large number of livestock. That's what I said. They left there with like 100,000 sheep, oxen, and very heavy livestock. So according to Exodus 12, this is just 4 chapters before they said they haven't had no meat. It says 4 chapters earlier, the Israelites left with a large number of livestock, sheep, oxen, and very heavy livestock. In Exodus 12:38, the Israelites' possession of cattle and livestock is reiterated again in Exodus 17, and this is just a chapter later. Just after they had complained they had no meat to eat in Exodus 16. So in Exodus 12, they had tons, they had heavy with cattle and everything else. Then they have no meat in 16, and then in 17 they're back to having a bunch of meat again. But then they said they had only manna for 40 years. So they just complained they had no meat in Exodus 16. And anyway, here's some other, I could put this link up if anybody wants it. The Jethro tradition, now preserved in Exodus 18, claims that Moses, Aaron, and Israel's elders ate bread, not unleavened manna. Remember that? Remember that? How many times that they had unleavened bread or unleavened bread? In fact, didn't they even leave with it? Anyway, so it cannot be true that they only ate manna for 40 years, because it says right here, Jethro's tradition. Remember, there's Jethro, which is Moses' father-in-law, and they call him Raul sometimes. And the Jethro tradition, now preserved in Exodus 18, claims that Moses, Aaron, and Israel's elders ate bread, not unleavened manna, with Jethro, and presumably meat too, since sacrifices were performed in 18:12. So Exodus 24:5 records a covenant tradition where some of the people eat meat. Remember? And so all through Exodus, they're eating meat. So how can they say they had no meat? So some of the people eat meat, peace offerings. The peace offering was a sacrifice performed on consumable meat. Leviticus 3 and all these other rules. This occurs less than a month after the quail story, according and chronologically imposed on the narrative by the later priestly redactor in Exodus which we did go over. The golden calf story, now at Exodus 32, states that all the people sat down to eat and drink. That is meat, peace offerings were made, as well as whole burnt offerings to Yahweh. So where are these animals coming from if all they have is manna for 40 years? So yeah, so here, even this, Mount Sinai here, they're sacrificing animals and eating meat. The eternal law of presenting daily Yahweh's showbread in the tent of meeting assumes that there's a grain to eat bread, reinforced throughout the book of Leviticus. We've gone through that exhaustively. Leviticus 1 through 7 is a priestly manual instructing the Aaronite, it looks like priesthood, about how to perform their various sacrifices, especially when the impure contamination happens or a sin is committed. Sacrifice, each of which requires livestock and assumes the Israelites have numerous livestock. So remember when we went through Leviticus, it's like you can't even go through a day without having to kill some animal. So where are all these animals coming from? Consumable animals, which is clean in Leviticus, Levitical diet. These are clean animals that they're sacrificing, then they ate them. All right. So they're to be performed during the wilderness period. Numerous sacrifices were performed in the period. This is all in scripture. In Aaron's consecration ceremony, both Moses and Aaron and sons eat the meat. Remember that? Remember that? In Leviticus 8 and 9. Remember? Because I thought that's kind of rude. Just Moses and his kids get to eat the meat. Nobody else. Anyway. But yeah, they were eating meat. Moses and his sons, Moses, his brother Aaron, and his sons, Aaron's sons, were eating the meat. Remember? They're the only ones that got to eat the meat. So yeah, all these, in fact, in the dedication ceremony recorded in number 7, by the way, this is only 3 chapters before they said they had no meat. In number 7 records a festive slaughtering of, including Yahweh's burnt offerings, 36 bulls, 72 rams, 60 goats, 72 lambs for consumption as meat. It happens on 1/1/2 according to the priestly reckoning. So, as you can see, look at how many animals they slaughtered for these festivals and everything else during that 40-year period. Numbers 9 were informed in the 2nd year Exodus on 1:42. The Israelites kept the Passover and they ate the 1 lamb per household, and ditto remaining for the next 38 years. So for 38 years, 39 years total, they ate lamb at every Passover. So where's this? How can they not have? Anyway, so that is quite a bit of proof that these are 2 completely different stories. Let me get back into the chat. Oh, we did good time, 1 hour and 3 minutes. All right. Not work very good. All right. Back over here. All right. Yeah, remember rabble rouser? I think they've called kids that. They used to call kids rabble rousers or something. Old-fashioned name. Great stuff, Kathy. I've always questioned the manna thing, but never realized that it was a doublet. I think I will be revisiting this live stream again to make sure I soak it all up. This was deep. It was deep, and I know it was a lot to take in. I kind of went at a steady pace because it was a lot to take in. What I think is cool, which I never knew until I studied this, is that that's where Jesus got that saying from. Man cannot live on bread alone, but that came from Deuteronomy, and Deuteronomy came from this manna story. So that's what that story, what Jesus was talking about, that's where that story came from. This story here about the man and the quail. And don't you think it's interesting that they're trying to say they lived on manna for 40 years, but then like every paragraph, they're like slaughtering hundreds of animals and eating them and sacrificing them. And you know what I mean? And they left it. And in fact, I have, you can look it up. But anyway, there is scripture, like I mentioned earlier, it is in Exodus, and I can't think of it right now. But there's a scripture that says, remember when they left Egypt, God told them to go around and ask people for stuff and they'll give it to them. So they got like a bunch of gold and silver and all this stuff, which they just melted down into the golden calf anyway. But anyway, so they said, God said, go ask people for stuff and they'll give it to you. And then don't worry, when you leave, um, you're going to leave with all your cattle and all your animals. And God put a curse on, so all the Egyptians' cattle, last one of them died. But the Israelites, not one of their cattle died. So they left with every one of their cattle. But the Egyptians were left behind with nothing. So what happened to all these cattle that God protected? You know what I mean? 2 weeks later, they're complaining they haven't had meat. Anyway, yeah, it is a lot to soak up. So yeah, if you have to watch and listen to it again, I hope I was thorough and clear on this. It is kind of a lot. And if I talk too much, I drag it out. So I tried not to talk too much. Just the facts. So, but yeah, if you know the stories, and it just doesn't make sense. What do you mean you lived? The only thing you ate was manna for 40 years. Get out of here. With all your thousands of cattle that you're eating. I know people like that. All I had today was a salad. Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Thanks for coming in, guys. Have a great rest of the evening. And yeah, you know who I'm talking about. You know who I'm talking about, Grace. Grace might be the only one listening who knows who I'm talking about. Someone who's specific. All right. So anyway, I hope y'all had a good day, and I hope tomorrow is even better. Anyway, thanks for coming in. If you're listening on the replay, thank you for listening on the replay. And thank you, Grace, for coming in and looking up what rabble means. It's a lawless mob of lawless people, which is what they called the people who wanted meat, claiming they didn't have meat when they got herds and herds of animals. Well, that maybe is. Maybe it was. They were holding out. They just wanted more. Like somebody telling you they're all out of something when they're stashing, holding out on you. They just want yours. All right. Well, love you guys. Thanks for coming in. Thank you, friends. And anyway, good night, everybody. Or good day, whatever time you're listening to this. I hope you're doing awesome. Good night, everybody. Goodbye.